Cheers, guys, and welcome to Uncle Scott's Pancast podcast. In the old Pancast today, we're going to talk Dutch ovens, kitchen knives, we're going to talk whiskey, AI, and I've got a bunch of feedback on that big Breville Control Freak video review I put up and more. Let's jump in and get started. I'm going to start with the feedback on the Breville Control Freak. Very expensive induction burner, list price $1,500. Put up a review and I gave it a thumbs up. It works really well. The downside is that price, and I got a lot of feedback from you guys. First thing we should acknowledge, not everyone cares about the Breville Control Freak. Cheryl Schwartz, 3950, wrote in and said, "Zero interest, love you anyway." And I remarked back to her, that is often the same thing I hear when I ask my wife for a date night. Let's see, a big issue with the Breville Control Freak and other induction burners and actually induction cooktops is burner coil size. And if you have an old electric coil stove or a gas stove, you can actually see how big the burner is. With inductions, they usually have some sort of ceramic glass top, and you can't really tell how big the burner coils are underneath. And lots of times the manufacturers won't tell you the actual burner size. So you can run into a problem where a burner has a big graphic and it looks like you can put a big wide pan on there, but really the burner coil is smaller in the middle and it doesn't work well with wider pots and pans. So the debate on the Control Freak is how big is the coil? Now the directions say you can put a pan on the Control Freak that is up to 10 inches wide. That does not mean that the burner coil itself is 10 inches wide, and there is some confusion about this. Let's see, Cheryl Denise 4476 wrote in and said thanks for reviewing the product. She's been wanting one, and she said she contacted Breville, and Breville said it's a 9-inch coil. I asked Breville myself, and they said it was proprietary, and they wouldn't tell me. Rockwalk 1975 said the information on the Control Freak home website from Chef Steps, which is apparently owned by Breville. I did not know that. They say it's a 10-inch coil. And perhaps Doug Goldie 7582 had the best suggestion. He said, got a screwdriver? So I guess we could open it up and look, but he says, note, capacitors can kill you. And for me, I think if I pay over $1,000 for a new induction burner, just me and my level of mechanical ability, I am not going to take the thing apart. I might break it. I might not be able to get it back together correctly. Let's see, a guy named Must Sato wrote in and said he actually opened his Breville up. Now, I didn't see pictures of this, but assuming this is correct, he said he measured and the coil is a little under 8.5 inches. Now, in the review video, I estimated the coil size at around 8 inches, and I did that based on a brown spot of burnt on bacon. I measured that, and if it's 8.5 in reality, I think the burnt on bacon test actually was fairly accurate. Taylor 9259 had the best suggestion here. He says there should be an industry standard for listing of coil sizes. Now, technically we do have the standard. It's a ruler, just the manufacturers don't really let you know exactly how big the coil size is. Now, Breville and the other manufacturers could easily clear up all this confusion. Just tell us exactly how wide the coils are, and then we'll all know. Easy enough. John at YouTube wrote in and said it's a very cool concept for the future, but just not economically or practically viable for most people. That's fair enough. Let's see, Chong Lee 297 said for $1,500 US, and he says he's a poor Canadian, but he could buy a 5-burner gas range for the same price as the Control Freak. That's a good point here. I don't see these Control Freaks as being replacements for entire ranges. I think they're complementary products, and they're products for people who have a need for a portable induction burner like this, especially one that's a commercial grade. Let's see, Gary Hammond 3117 wrote in and said super concept and great unit, but he said sadly most people, because of the affordability, are going to go with $100 induction burners available at the big box stores. Unless you really need one of those small induction burners, I am going to try and dissuade people from going with one of the cheaper units. I used one for a couple of years. Mine just did not work very well. Maybe if you're just going to boil a couple of cups of water in a small saucepan like this, they might be okay. But as far as wider cookware and doing any type of real deal cooking, I do not like those smaller inductions, and I would just avoid them if you can. Copper diffuser plates. In the last Pancast, I said I was going to mention copper diffuser plates, and then I was watching the video later, and apparently I forgot to do that. So I recommend copper diffuser plates, especially if you're going to use big, wide cast iron cookware or big, wide pots, gas burners. And the one I have is a Duparquet, and I believe it's 3 millimeters thick. So it's a big, thick, heavy copper diffuser. And they don't give these things away. They were well over $100 just for a copper diffuser plate, but I think worth every penny. And if you use one under a big, wide Dutch oven, when you're doing some slow simmering, it really does help to spread out the heat and prevent getting a scorch spot right over a low gas flame. So get a copper diffuser and it will really help your cooking. While we're talking Dutch ovens, I showed this big Le Creuset in the video, and Gamer NX USN wrote in and asked about the color of this Dutch oven and asked, is this an ocean color? This is called artichoke with a T sound, not a hard C sound, artichoke. And I don't know if it's a standard color or if it was just a special edition, but that is the artichoke color, kind of a greenish. And I think it looks really nice. Let's see, Michael E. Durow wrote in and was talking about this stove. I made the big pot roast in this. He commented under the pot roast video and asked, is this one better or the same as the Le Creuset? Now, I've done videos on Le Creuset versus Staub, and to sum it all up, it's not Le Creuset versus Staub, it's Le Creuset and Staub. I like having both high-end brands. They both look great. They both perform very well. The way I choose, is this one better than a Le Creuset? It's not better, but the reason I chose this one, it was on sale, and the price difference was significant. The comparable Le Creuset for this 6 1/4 quart oval lists for about 450 bucks. This one also lists for about 450 bucks, but there was a big sale and lots of the different colors were on for about 250. This particular color was $199, so I absolutely jumped on that. $250 less, it was an easy choice to go with the Staub. And along those lines, once you get 1 or 2 Dutch ovens and you kind of got your base level laid down, if you don't mind being patient and picking and choosing, just waiting for the sales, you can actually build up a big collection of fancy high-end cookware, these Dutch ovens, at a relatively low price. A big stove, a big Le Creuset for less than 200 bucks. Add 1 piece a year, and over 10 years or so, you've got a big collection of great cookware, and you never paid full price. Let's talk about AI just a little bit. I don't know if you noticed in the Breville video, I came up with some AI generated graphics to use as kind of cut graphics between scenes. I've been using Canva, and you can kind of see the promise of AI. There's no way in the world I ever would have hired a graphic artist to do graphics like this. But you go in there and you kind of type in what you want and put in a few parameters, and it comes up with images. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. I thought we might take a look at some of the funny ones that actually didn't work. In the Breville video, I made a joke about finding grandma face down in the scrambled eggs. Here's one that didn't work. Grandma looks a little evil there. I did a pop-up site called Christmas Cookware Deals, and I asked for some snowmen and reindeer. Here is a reindeer with a snowman head. And there's a snowman with antlers. So a lot of times you kind of glance at the graphics and they look right, and then you start looking a little more closely and there's something off with them. Here's another grandma in the scrambled eggs. Here it looks like she has been beheaded and we are having her for breakfast. I wanted a chicken. I was going to deep fry some chicken. I wanted a chicken that said fry me. This one says feed me. So maybe somewhere in the AI, someone feels a little sorry for the chickens. Maybe the intelligence does there. This one from a little closer to Thanksgiving, we've got a turkey in a pilgrim's hat with a snowman's base. And in this one, we've got a turkey with a snowman's head. So sometimes you come up with these graphics and you glance at them and it's like, oh, that's awesome. Then you start looking at them and it's like, there is something a little bit off around here. Now, I am only scratching the surface of AI here, but you can kind of see down the road and see the potential of it. Now, if I were a graphic artist or if I were Adobe and trying to sell Photoshop, I would be very worried. There's no way I could afford to pay a graphic artist to do custom images just for cutscenes in a simple cooking video. With AI, I think I'm paying $9, $12 a month for a Canva, and I get my own custom graphics. It's pretty doggone cool, and I'm sure it will get better as it goes. And maybe at some point I can come up with an AI supermodel to replace me in these Pancasts. Let's see. We've been touching on knives, and in particular, I showed this Yaxell, a Super Glue 2 knife that I got. I showed that in the last Pancast. I got in a little bit of trouble for saying that I'm just going to use my knives and use those handheld sharpeners, and if they get worn out, so be it. I got in a little bit of trouble with that for saying that, and people were saying, well, you should take care of your stuff. I do take care of my stuff, but I just don't want to take such good care of cookware that I don't use it. We run into this with carbon steel skillets. If you get a fantastic work of art seasoning on there, sometimes that dissuades you from actually cooking in the pan because you don't want to mess up your seasoning. Things get flipped around there. Also with cutting boards, when my wife and I got married, been over 10 years ago, someone gave us a very nice cutting board. And for 4 or 5 years, every time I tried to cook, it was like, don't use that cutting board, it's too nice. And I had a nice cutting board, I never used it. And I was scared to mess it up. At some point, just use the cutting board. And if you wear out a cutting board, it's a badge of honor, just get another cutting board. So take fantastic care of your equipment. Obviously, get as much life out of it as possible, but don't go so crazy that you're afraid to use it. Let's see, Jim Caputo Music wrote in. It said, Yaxell is a gateway drug into the world of Japanese knives, and he's spent way more on a single knife than he has on any pot, Dutch oven, or pan. I say go for it because cooking is kind of a hobby. If you play golf, it's nice to have nice golf clubs. You want a nice putter. Excuse me. What's going on over here? For those wondering, Mabel is growing like a weed and is supposed to be quietly playing over there on the floor. Not happening though, so you get to make an appearance. But I say go for it. If you have a hobby, if it's something you love, golf clubs, get a nice putter, get a nice driver. If you're into skiing, get a nice pair of skis and your own ski boots. If you're into fishing, get a nice fishing rod. And if you're into cooking, having nice knives and pots and pans and fancy stoves, life is too short. If you can afford it, go for it and enjoy it. Let's see, at 200 Cosborn wrote in and said he's been delving into Japanese knives and wants to know if I sussed out the differences between stainless steel and carbon steel knives. So most of my knives are just regular stainless steel. The new Yaxell is the SG2 steel. I really like that. I've been into that a little bit lately. And I only have one carbon steel knife. My thoughts on the carbon steel is I really do like carbon steel. There's just a lot more maintenance, and inevitably I end up leaving this thing in a sink and it gets wet, and I leave it overnight, and it probably happens once every 2 to 3 months or so. I forget about it and I come back in and that carbon steel has rusted. So there's definitely a little bit more maintenance with the carbon steel. You occasionally have to clean some rust off. I made a huge mistake of trying to chip some ice with my fancy Kramer carbon steel, and I broke the tip off the blade, so I had to spend some time kind of reshaping the tip. But in terms of cutting and just enjoying using it, I really love this guy for cutting French fries. I find cutting potatoes, slicing long French fries with this guy to be very relaxing for some reason. So I really do like the carbon steel, just a lot more maintenance with it. But if you got a lot of stainless steel knives and want to try a carbon steel, get one, try it, and see what you think of it. You might like it. The gas stove ban. The induction burner review brought up the gas stove ban issue, and I've lost the let's see, Olga Kim 4848 wrote in, said no, they were not going to take your gas stoves away or ban gas stoves. I heartily disagree with that. And there was actually definitely a movement, especially in New York and California, to ban gas stoves. In the last couple of weeks, the outgoing administration put in a ban with a stroke of a pen to ban certain categories of tankless gas water heaters. And I fear that banning gas stoves would be that easy. It could happen with the stroke of a pen. I did see that the new incoming administration, and I don't want to get too much into politics here, said they are considering rules to protect gas stoves. With the incoming administration, if RFK Jr. gets in there, it's going to be very interesting to see how politics and cooking and cookware really kind of interact for the next couple of years or so. If certain food ingredients get banned, I saw one of the red dyes has already been banned. Are there going to be tariffs on cookware? Maybe those cheap Chinese non-stick pans, they might not be so cheap anymore. People might be moving to stainless steel or carbon steel or cast iron. If there are going to be tariffs on European pans, what's it going to do to Duparquet, to Mauviel, to Mapfer? And then just those PFOA, PFOS non-stick chemicals, might those be banned? Probably going to be a lot of newsworthy items coming up in the old cooking, cookware, and food space coming up with the new administration. And we will be all over that. And finally, whiskey. I saw that Brown-Forman, which owns Jack Daniels, has said that they are going to sell off their barrel making factory. And for me, that kind of put up a red flag. I always get a little skeptical when I see a very high-end, well-established brand do something like this to cut costs. Now, it may be necessary to survive, who knows? But Jack Daniel's definitely an upper middle to upper level brand in the whiskey space. I know back in the day when volume was important and no one had any money back in college, we used to drink Evan Williams. And you get that green label Evan Williams 90 proof because you got extra 10 proof for the money. But Jack Daniel's is always aspirational. And I remember some of my buddies and I got together for a little Christmas gathering, and one of the guys brought a bottle of Jack Daniel's for everybody to share. And it was just like he might as well brought a bag of gold nuggets. It was that incredible. People ordered Jack and Cokes. It's a well-established high-end brand. Likewise with Frank Sinatra. I've seen a list of the items he requested for his dressing room. One of the liquors on there was Jack Daniel's. So kind of a classic higher-end brand. But what I worry about, and I don't know why I worry about this, it's not my brand. What I worry about is when you have a fancy, established, high-end brand like that and you start cutting costs, eventually you're going to start cutting quality as well. So maybe it won't affect things in the short term, but maybe eventually if they use cheaper barrels not made in-house, the Jack Daniel's might not taste quite the same as it used to. And then they will have to discount the brand, and then it just goes downhill from there. I would say save $10, $20 million in executive salaries, fire some of those guys, and keep making your own barrels. I did also notice an article from the Kentucky bourbon industry, said there are currently 15.4 million barrels of whiskey aging. And I think that was only in Kentucky, and over 14 million barrels of that were bourbon. Just as a consumer, what that means to me is that eventually there should be a big supply of good bourbon coming down the pike. Constant demand with higher supply should lead to lower prices. Yay! All right, this little girl is getting a little fussy. It's time to go track down Mom. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Uncle Scott's Pancast podcast.